Hi, so welcome everybody to this second video in the series of three. I'm going to split this one into three sections, so three separate videos, just so it's quicker to upload. So the image I've chosen for this one is this. It's just a stock image, sunset. So we have a lot of green down here, and then we have a nice sort of orangey sunset up in the sky. And if you go over to this image here, we can see I've cropped it a little bit. All these images will be on the email I've sent you. I've cropped it a little bit just for composition purposes. So it was a little bit too stretched out. The sun was a little bit far over in the left-hand side. Now, I did this in Photoshop, but you don't need Photoshop at all for this. You can just do it with a pencil when you're drawing out. Landscape is very forgiving for this, being able to move things around and manipulate elements within your painting. So I zoomed up on it a little bit. I've moved the sun. I've cropped it in. And then I've just pulled it into black and white. I'll have sent you the Notan file as well so that you can see that. I'll do the Notan with pen. So the reason I've done this is we've got a lot of bright colours in there, greens and oranges. It's very, very difficult to pick out the values of them. And we know at this stage now that the success of your painting rests on being able to pick out the values correctly within the piece. Colour is fantastic. Colour adds a lot of character and drama to your painting, but the real work is done with the values underneath. So you can see from the Notan I've sent you, we've probably got 4 values in this, but if I was just to pick 3, I would say, well, let's make this dark, let's make this area here dark, then we've got a middle value here, and then everything up in the sky has to be lighter along with the lake there. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Notan of this. As I said, you can do this with paint if you don't have the markers. So, first thing I do is just make a small little thumbnail. I really don't want to be trying to fill the page at this stage. It's too much work to put in. Let's get the main shape. So I push the sky up to 1/3 of the way. I've got the lake there, I've got the sun there, and I've got a triangle wedge of dark foliage, a triangle of field, and a triangle of middle value field. So first thing I'm going to do is set in my middle values. Nice thick marker. I've got a profile there in the distance, and that might not seem like much, but this little sense of aerial perspective is something that can make a huge difference in your landscape painting. It adds real depth to it. I'm going to block in the field. See the way I'm trying to create good dynamic lines as I'm doing this. And then lastly, just block in the dark. So we have the fields, the hedges, the trees running down, hard edge on the bottom of this section, and then bushes and trees jumping up from it. Same here. Okay, so what we want is a good dynamic composition, very strong sense of dark, mid and light. That's a good place to start my painting. So next stage, I want to get my equipment together, get prepared. Okay, I have a canvas here that I've just primed with a very, very light coat of burnt umber acrylic. Now I've kept it really, really light, okay, because I'm going to be using some transparent colours here. The darker the ground you put on, yes, it can create dramatic effects, but it can also be very difficult to work with. I have a little bit of half and half, 50% linseed oil, 50% Sansador, odour-free solvent. I have a palette knife if I need it. I have my brushes laid out there, 2 or 3 brushes. Let's talk a little bit about colours. So, for this painting, I'm going to use a split palette, a split primaries. So we've done a lot of work up till now with primaries, which is a neutral yellow, a neutral red, and a neutral blue. And at this stage, I want to split those. Instead of having a neutral blue, I'm going to have a slightly warmer blue, slightly cooler blue. So let me just show you this very simple colour wheel here. Okay, so here I have, let's say, a primary blue. The warmer blue is creeping towards green. It's not green, but it's creeping towards it. And the cooler blue is creeping towards the violet. The same on the red. We have a red that's creeping towards warm with orange and creeping towards cool, pushing towards the kind of scarlety into purple. Okay, so the colours I've picked out are... have them here. So I have a cobalt turquoise light. Now, if you don't have this, you can create an adequate sort of substitute by using cerulean blue, a tiny little bit of yellow, and a little bit of white, and you'll get something that doesn't have the same intensity, but in terms of hue, which is the overall colour, it's fairly close. I have an ultramarine blue, which is my neutral to cool blue. You should all have that. I have an Indian yellow. Again, if you don't have that, you might use a cadmium yellow, a true cadmium yellow, which tends towards orange. Then I have a cadmium yellow light, which is neutral to cool, so pure yellow. I have a cadmium red, which is quite a warm red, and I have a very cool red, which is tending towards violet or purple. If you don't have that, you could substitute it with an alizarin crimson as well. Now, there are other characteristics to these paints, not just the hue or the colour. We have opaque ones, and we're going to be doing a bit of work with this today. We have opaque ones, which means they don't let much light through. They block everything underneath. And we have transparent ones, like ultramarine is transparent. Indian yellow is highly transparent. If I just pop a little bit on the canvas, you'll be able to see what I mean. So this one lets a lot of the light through, whereas this one blocks it completely. So I'm just going to lay my paints out here. I have my cobalt turquoise there, so it makes sense to put my other blue next to it, which is ultramarine. I'm going to put my yellows over here, keep them nice and clean. There are my 2 yellows, and I'm going to put my 2 reds over here. There we go. A little bit more turquoise there. Obviously I need white as well. Here's a nice big blob of white. The only other things I need for this are some paper towels. And I have a wipe, a wet wipe. So let's go back to that image. Let's just bring it back into colour. Now we've looked a little bit at the black and white, the kind of dynamic shapes with the Notan. Let me just go back a little to the colour. And let's think about the essence of this thing. What's it about? Well, really, I would say certainly there's green in it, which is quite important, but it really loses something without that sun, okay? So the sun is a really important part of it, as is the green. And what we have is a really lovely set of complementaries there, which is the warm orange colours of the sky, and then these cooler greens, okay? So now I'm going to push these greens, if I can, towards the cooler end of the spectrum. Okay, so what I'm not going to do with this piece is what I did with the monochrome piece, which was to set it out pretty much in black and white first of all. The reason for that is the brown or the black paint will contaminate the greens and the oranges and dull them right down. So I want to keep this really, really clean, this painting. You can see the power of the staining power of cadmium yellow there in action. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is oil up this canvas. So a little bit of the medium, 50-50, onto the canvas. Not too much, just to help the flow of this painting. I'm going to take the brush, a number 2. Actually, let's do most of this work maybe with a number 4 brush. So I need to draw some of it out. It makes sense to go in with a middle kind of green colour, which will then get absorbed into all the field work down here. So I'm going to mix a dark green by using my transparent ultramarine and a little bit of the Indian yellow. Okay, you might be using a little bit of the cadmium yellow, the true cadmium yellow, which has got an orange tint. If you don't have that, you could also try a bit of yellow ochre. That's fairly similar. So let's draw this out. And you can see this colour has gone to green now. It's been pulled away from that blue end of the spectrum. Now I want to keep the character of that Notan sketch we did. I want to keep it nice and loose and dynamic. And I have my lake there. So at least I have a little framework now that I can paint around. Certainly don't want to be marking out the sun in green, because then I'll have an awful job trying to take that green paint out of the orange. Okay, so let's go in with the dark green first of all. Side of the brush. Remember the Notan, straight edge along the bottom and a good dynamic bounce along the top there. Are there any more dark greens? Yes, there are a few coming in here in these hedges. Okay. Now, as these greens rise up, I want to make them lighter and I want to make them cooler. How do I do that? Okay, so I can make them lighter by adding a little bit of cobalt turquoise. You might say, oh, cobalt turquoise is a warm blue. Yes, but I'm working with a green here, so any kind of blue is going to create a cooler. Any sort of blue is going to create a cooler green. Can get quite complex, this colour theory. So here we have a lovely coolish green. As I said, you can use a substitute with cerulean blue, pushing off into the distance. So this is where a little bit of colour theory can really add a lot of drama to your painting. So it frees you up to experiment. And as it goes further back, it's going to get lighter and cooler again. So I'm just going to add white for this little section. And in terms of black and white, I'm still in the sort of the greys at the moment. Okay. Now, let's look for the middle greys now, which is that little section in the distance there and the field in the foreground. Now, they're both green in essence. There's a big difference between them. The one in the distance, because of aerial perspective, all of the yellows and the reds have been sucked out of it and it's gone towards a very light sort of bluish colour. Whereas the ones in the foreground have kept their yellow. So let's come back down, introduce some yellow into the foreground. I'm going to use a Indian yellow and see how I get on. I need to lighten it a little bit. Let's look at that. So there we have a value that's lifted, but the colour's been tinted right over towards a yellowish warm green.